Welcome to Season 5, Episode 3 of the ESG Experience, the podcast about all things ESG and beyond. Whether you're an ESG expert or just dipping your toes into the ESG universe, this podcast could be for you. Together, we'll navigate the alphabet soup of ESG, share strategies, and discuss industry news and trends. I'm Ryan Nelson, SVP and General Manager of ESG at Conservice.
And I'm Chris Morales, the ESG Solutions Architect.
Chris Morales, I was expecting a Healy, but I guess she couldn't make it. So thank you for being here, Chris Morales. I'm going to guess this is the first podcast you've ever hosted. Is that accurate or no?
That is correct. Yeah, I'm going to be stepping in for Healy.
All right. Well, welcome aboard. What is a ESG Solutions Architect, by the way?
Yeah, to summarize it, basically in a data-driven software company like Conservice, I serve as the link between the business needs and technical execution. So a lot of the times I'm working with the software ecosystem and its capabilities to make sure that I'm able to architect solutions to drive our success.
Awesome. All right. Well, great to have you stepping in. Today, we are joined by Thomas Stanchak, the Director of Sustainability at Stoneweg. Due to his success and influence in reshaping the company's ESG strategy, we are thrilled to have him here. Tom began his career with Stoneweg US in 2017 as an asset manager, where he was responsible for overseeing operations, maximizing occupancy, and maintaining budgets for 17 assets in the Midwestern region. In 2019, Tom was promoted to senior asset manager, assuming operational responsibility for more than 50% of total AUMs, where assets under management, I will say, where his operational leadership was hugely impactful in the company's ability to deliver healthy returns to investors that year. In 2020, Tom began focusing his efforts on implementing various energy efficient and innovative practices to his portfolio by introducing water use conservation, LED retrofits, and effective recycling methods that would not only incorporate sustainability, but also provide key value add for residents. Today, with the expert that is Tom that I just described, we're going to explore how investments in solar panels and high efficiency HVAC systems can significantly reduce operational costs and energy bills, while simultaneously increasing property value and delivering solid ROI, as evidenced by past projects. Our discussion will highlight key performance metrics such as EUI, we'll learn what that is, and Energy Star scores, we'll learn what that is. Essential for identifying cost-saving opportunities and reducing operating expenses. We'll also examine how these improvements can enhance resident retention, contributing to the overall success of property management strategies. I'm almost done, and we'll introduce Tom. In addition to performance, we'll explore the technological advancements driving these sustainability initiatives, such as browser-based software that models both financial and environmental performance. We'll also discuss current policies and market trends and share success stories from Stoneweg just in this discussion with one of the industry experts, all of that. So Thomas, finally, welcome to you. We're going to go with Tom. I think we agreed, but thank you for joining us today. Really appreciate having your time and hearing the great things you're doing.
I'm really happy to be here, Ryan and Chris. I can tell you that over the last few years, and like you went over my career with Stoneweg, but you know, in reality, I've been in real estate almost my entire life, and I'm finally getting to the point where, yeah, along with the gray hair I'm getting, or the white hair I'm getting, I also feel like I have a certain amount of wisdom from all the experience, and happy to share it with you.
Well, that's great. Wisdom is an interesting thing, is it? I actually spent a lot of time reading philosophy. That's one of like my main hobbies, is like trying to study philosophy a little bit. And, you know, there's this knowledge, trying to gain knowledge, and then what is wisdom, and it just means like how to live and to be able to know those things. So yeah, I don't know, it's an interesting thing. I'm happy that we get to hear some of your wisdom.
I do a similar kind of research on systems thinking in systems, and a lot of that. And it, you know, a lot of people find this kind of like a sort of a boring subject. I think it takes a lot of imagination. Like, you know, Chris is a solutions architect. I think that you know, we take for granted a lot of the thought and creativity that go into making things work.
Yeah, agreed. I want to go down that systems thinking path. That's come across my conversations recently a couple different times. So I definitely want to go down that way. Well, why don't you start by, if you would, telling us a little bit about Stoneweg. It's a very
Sure.
inspirational company, and specifically Stoneweg US. And could you help me? Do you want me to pronounce the W as W or
Okay.
V? Yeah, I
Either
want to get it
way,
right.
either way.
We're comfortable with. Okay.
So I grew up outside of Cleveland, Ohio. So Stoneweg is
Me too.
Stoneweg or Stoneweg. Yeah. Go Browns.
Yes. All right.
Everything I learned about life as a child was Municipal Stadium. We
A
had
lot
season
can be
tickets.
learned there. Yeah.
None of it good, unfortunately.
No, I mean, yeah, not a lot.
I went to Cleveland recently for the eclipse, and it's remarkable. Cleveland's still kind of like got a huge place, kind of like the heartland of America, and just from the point of view of somebody who thinks a lot about real estate investing and multifamily real estate investing, I really am still very, very much believe that the Midwest is kind of like a solid bet for the long term. So I guess to talk about Stoneweg, Patrick Richard, our CEO, he founded the company in the US, but it's part of a larger group, the Stoneweg Group, that has offices in Geneva and across continental Europe. And it's a diversified real estate company. So I'm really focused on our US investment operations, and particularly how we can basically find opportunity at the intersection of sustainability and all things ESG and multifamily real estate investing. So how I kind of approach this is think about how to bridge the needs and wants and desires of capital markets with kind of like, acquisition and asset management, and trying to find really all those intersections and make something more out of the places where you kind of like find harmony. And that kind of relates back to my idea of systems thinking and creating value out of kind of making things work. The solution is that you can't try to force people to do things. You need to recycle because it'll make you a good person or that sort of thing. I think that the really smart solutions in ESG and sustainability are going to come from those that are just easy to use and understand.
Yeah, that kind of reminds me of the desire lines concept, which I imagine you're familiar with, right? I mean, you can build a sidewalk that goes, a particular way, but if there's actually a little bit better path that goes like this, people are going to go that way. And,
that's where people are going to go. So, how do you, I really think that, solutions they have to be human centric, people centric, because that's who we are and that's who we serve ultimately. And the impact of climate change is really more of a problem for people. You want to get into the geology of it and like that sort of thing. It becomes very kind of, something else. But really, the impact and the reason that we need to decarbonize, and the reason that we need to get ready to build a more sustainable real estate future is because of the consequences it'll have on people. Or kind of like how I look at it is there's an opportunity to create a better life experience for people. And that's not just the people, who invest with us, but that's the people who rent with us and kind of like the broader. I believe that there's an accretive value in quality.
That's very well said. Did either of you see the latest report on the parts per million of carbon dioxide? We set a new record.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I follow kind of like I follow kind of globally by country projected extraction of fossil fuels and things like that. And until you start to see a curve in that,
Sure.
I'm going to very so I have to live in two different worlds. My job is to create a platform to understand, manage, and drive down emissions intensity for our investments and for our company. But globally, I understand that we're in a bubble, literally on a planet in a bubble. And unless we all reduce extraction of fossil fuels, the consequences remain the same.
Yeah. So parts per million is I think you're implying that's kind of a lagging indicator. You're looking at fossil fuel extraction, and you're probably able to predict it. parts per million is not going down yet because of the continued possible. Interesting. Yeah. Well, I love the theory stuff more than anything, but also let's talk about some practical applications, some things that perhaps you've done. Let's start with CapEx investments. What does CapEx mean? What are you doing? Does it work? That intersection that you're looking for, how do maybe CapEx investments fit in?
So I guess to put it simply, in kind of like tangible terms, if you're going to make an investment, so non-operational spending, you buy something that is, disposable, it's an operational expenditure. If you are going to make an investment in a durable good or an improvement, it's a CapEx spend. In general, if done correctly, every dollar should be treated as an investment. And that's kind of where I begin to draw the line in the thread between kind of carbon accounting and real estate investing, is that carbon and dollars are somewhat fungible. And if you really kind of pay close attention to creating a full accounting of your carbon impact and how to manage that better, the best and kind of first tool you should employ is thinking about your spending. And am I making an investment, or am I sort of just, thoughtlessly or unstrategically kind of dumping resources? And this is, I think, a really powerful idea when it comes to bringing together real estate investment and sustainability, is that, a big chunk of this can just basically improve outcomes for investors. And I think that if you start there and really focus on that and leverage that, any sort of consternation or concern or kind of like that kind of thing can be broken away, and you really can get to the heart of the matter, which is, if you look at, we talked a little bit earlier before we got on the call about our first carbon accounting disclosure. And if you look at that, and at the fund level, so we did two, one at the asset management level, meaning as an investment manager, our corporate operations expenditures, but then one, we manage funds. For our largest fund, we did the same sort of disclosure. So Stoneweg US is trying to walk the talk in the sense of, we're focused on real estate performance because we believe that there's a strong correlation between high performance buildings and value creation. But as the asset manager, we understand that we also have a duty to understand our impact on the environment and to manage this. So getting back to the CapEx part, ultimately, I think about a third of our Scope 3 emissions, which is unsurprisingly the largest amount, are related to our CapEx spending. And what this reveals is that if we're smarter about the way that we spend, we can actually get a better return out of that spending, but also reduce our emissions. And I think that that's a super powerful idea that I want to spread. I want everyone to start to think in those terms, is that you are acting sustainably when you are making wise decisions in investing.
What is a wise decision?
Yeah, I was just
One
about
example.
High efficiency equipment. Well, then like I've got to go back into my own kind of like self-serving world of thinking about the long term. As soon as you say, well, it's a better long-term investment, somebody will say, well, I want a short-term return too. And, all of a sudden there's just no end to the desire for kind of like this sort of thing. It can work on any horizon. And I think that how you need to begin to think about it is that not every solution is going to be a good solution, but there are good sustainable solutions in CapEx for short-term returns. Water conservation is the one that really kind of takes up most of the oxygen in that space. Water conservation is very easy to understand, and it's often, we're doing a project in Dallas on Monday, a retrofit that is going to have a 0.7 year return. I mean, literally it'll pay for itself in 7 months. And so that's a short-term return. Even for the US commercial real estate market, where people are kind of like doing flips on the multi-$100 million scale on commercial real estate. That's not something that we do, but I see it happening in the market. You can be sustainable in that sense too, but you need to become strategic. And so this is kind of like how we manage our CapEx spending is we start to look at our investment horizons. We start to, we put together a scope of work that is consistent with our sustainability goals, which are outlined. So basically I go through a document of our goals and I kind of pair that to an analysis of the real estate opportunity. I define a strategy that can be implemented, and I attach an ROI to it. So I attach a cost and return to it, and then you begin to make decisions. I think that an approach to sustainability is like this is just ultimately, sober and thoughtful real estate investing.
Awesome.
Right.
Yeah, I was gonna add. So a lot of what we're talking about, like you're saying, small, short-term and returns and long-term returns, and I think ESG a lot of the times it's the idea that there's a long-term and not short-term, right? But I think in general there's a lot more to that. Do you have like any other, ways that we can try to track that? Like, is there a way to have a metric to judge performance? Obviously, like how we talked about before, you did a carbon footprint analysis, on 2 levels. Like, how are we supposed to judge those analysis in the future?
So I think that the big picture is don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. So every company should conduct this sort of carbon footprint analysis, because that's in the best way they can. There are lots of free tools. There are a number of paid sort of tools online, that kind of thing. But just go through the process and just try to figure out the size of this, and then think about it in kind of, I take an entrepreneurial approach, and I think about how can this make next year better? What levers can I pull? And if more people would do that, that emissions intensity stuff would go down, because you would start to see changes in, basically, we're seeing a lot of great changes in investment in renewables and investment in building energy efficiency and alternative energy generation and that kind of thing. But at the same time, the globally, the human population is becoming wealthier, and often the cheapest way to get wealthier is through fossil fuels, extracting and burning fossil fuels. So it's made the world a more wealthy and better place, but at the same time, it's not sustainable in the sense of the impact of this in the next 30 and 50 years is going to be remarkable on what it will do to, it's kind of like the tail end coming back and like, hitting the earth and saying, you've taken energy that took millions and millions of years to produce, and you've burned it in 100 years. I mean, it's not really even comprehensible, kind of like what we're doing, in the sense of like, how long it took for these resources to be available on earth, and then how fast we're using them. And I think that the problem is that this kind of moral argument really resonates with me, but the problem is that it doesn't really work in general. Mm-hmm. And so what I try to do is just default to doing my job, which is pay attention to real estate investing and show how you can be more successful with being thoughtful in this way over time. And that's just really the tool that I'm now defaulting to, because it's the moral argument. Really, if you don't kind of envision and empathize with this, it's denial is easy and cheap, but it doesn't matter. All the denial in the world is not going to stop the inevitable. And so this is the world that I have to be very sort of thinking about how you constantly try to overcome these problems and try to make the situation better.
Definitely.
Yeah, well, this is a great forum as far as I'm concerned, to talk about the moral components of it too. It's very interesting. So I was thinking about it. This is maybe too much information for everyone, but when I'm trying to figure out how to fall asleep, I invented a time machine, and I decide where I'm going, and I think about it. And just last night, I went back to check out on some the dinosaurs. So that's what I was doing, and it just got me thinking. My friend keeps using the term dino juice now when we make fun of non-electric cars. Those cars that run on dino juice. And yeah, to your point, like if you just it's actually more interesting to talk about. Like if you're at a party, do you want to talk about, your solar panel CapEx project, or you want to talk
Yeah.
about this wild idea of these dinosaurs that lived here but they were here for millions and millions, at least millions, maybe a bit, I don't know, millions of years. And then they all died. And that's where we're getting this energy, right? Like it's literally what fossil fuels are. And there's no more dinosaurs dying.
Ryan, I have anytime soon. I hope not, at least.
Right. I have a secret weapon. My husband's getting a PhD in paleoceanography, which is largely the study of geology. And so the kind of concept of natural history is very much sort of a kitchen table and household conversation for us. And phytoplankton and like what, a lot of people are like, trees do everything. And it's actually, no, the ocean actually are, it's the Earth's lungs. And this is what is doing most of the carbon sequestration, as well as, most of the Earth's respiration, providing us, a good atmosphere. That I know that's a lot to kind of unpack in a really kind of, quick few sentences, but I think that demonstrates I am a real estate investment person, but fundamentally I do think about the moral implications of climate change and what that how that's going to impact working people in the US, because that's part of my part of the way that I think about multifamily real estate investing. And I really do think that there's a moral imperative to do this, but I don't think that alone is going to trigger the kind of change that we need to make systematically in order to make a huge difference. And I think the change that needs to be made, people need to think about the future they want and choose the future they want. I want to think about a real estate portfolio in 2035 that is zero emissions. And that's what I'm working towards. And I would like to, really have a sit down and do a conversation with anyone who thinks that that's not going to be worth more than theirs on a per square basis footage, or on a basis footage now on a basis between now and then, or any other way you can imagine it. I mean, it's just, to me, this is a better route and a better way forward for real estate as well as the planet.
Yeah, I'd like to think that the moral component was enough to move us all, but we know it's not. So again, practical purposes for a minute. Maybe tell us a little bit about how you're modeling that. I mean, you want to model environmental performance, but you also have to model financial performance. So what kind of, we hinted at browser-based software, visualizing long-term benefits. What are the kind of some of the practical tools for colleagues in your industry to look at?
So I think it's, what I think is interesting today is that there is kind of like fairly easy and accessible means of making an accountability and a positive feedback loop between what you're doing and the outcomes. Like I said, I've had a long career in this, and when I first entered real estate, kind of like in as a profession, as a young adult, I managed a high-rise building, and we were retrofitting incandescents and fluorescence with more efficient fluorescence. And this was like, and I'm like, we saved the earth, and you're welcome.
We did T12s to T8s. Does that mean anything?
Yeah. Remember
that doesn't mean anything anymore, does it? Yeah.
Well, no, that's where we're tearing all this stuff out and we're putting in LEDs, or this. So and we could talk about the progress of energy efficiency, because this is something I think is really interesting, because it's speeding up as well. But going back to kind of like this idea of accountability, and this is a powerful concept as well. There are lots of promises made about the financial performance of improving energy efficiency, but rarely is there any accountability around this. people don't measure it, but it's not even just about sustainability. It's about kind of like these sorts of investments in general. They're very lazy about it. And so I think a real differentiator is using your building performance data to create a positive feedback loop and to inform your asset management team and your investment team about the results of the things that you're doing. So, you know, Ryan, you can take pride, and Ryan and Chris can take pride that, you know, we're working with Conservice and using our data in this way, where it's not just about kind of annual reporting for GRESB or you know, doing this sort of ad hoc analysis, but we're systematizing it, and we're doing it in a way that, like, I'm bringing it back where we put in a solar panel, and this morning I went in and I looked at month over month and trending on cost and use and the impact of this. And I can have an authentic and factual conversation with our investment management team, with our asset management team, with our CEO, with the board on Monday of our largest fund about what we're doing and how it's impacting our goals in terms of sustainability, but also our financial performance over time. And I think that this is an evolution that is kind of ripe to take full, you know, a full opportunity that and all it has to offer. I think that this is a better way of doing business fundamentally.
Yeah, well, was not meant to be a plug for us, but yeah, thank you for mentioning it. Chris and I definitely are proud of what we're up to, and especially in collaboration with an organization like yours. I have to be careful because we have so many incredible customers.
Yeah.
But you absolutely are an inspiration to you, Stoneweg, are an inspiration to what we're doing here, and help us drive our other customers and ourselves too. So that's been awesome.
So Ryan, but I'll just be very clear about this. It is in my best interest that everyone kind of, like, you know, listening to this and all of my peers listen and try to copy the things that I do that are successful, because the more mainstream this becomes, the more
Right.
value what it's a positive feedback loop in itself.
Of course.
So I don't kind of pretend that, like, you know, this is my secret sauce and this is what I'm doing. I'm like, I spend a lot of time just basically outlining every step I take. I do this in our ESG annual report that I'm writing now. It's probably going to be over 250 pages long. Literally, this is just a blueprint. I'm like, do it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
But I wanted to also touch too, because I know we've talked about, like, you know, the metrics that you're judging these, you know, your performances on, and in the future, and some of these goals you have with net neutrality, and some of the, you know, things that you're taking into consideration. I think the one thing, other than, obviously we talked about, like, the moral driver to do some of these things, but other than moral drivers, you know, there's obviously policies, and I think you touched on, like, BPS a little bit, building performance standards. What policies are, like, you guys paying attention to that are on your map that you're looking to dive into more and to, you know, analyze more?
I think the greatest policy is when equity has a policy towards a net zero.
Yes.
Because when the person that's basically writing the check has basically an accountability, there's two ways to approach it. There's compliance, kind of, you know, BPS and benchmarking, and also doing this because my client is requiring it. Isn't that like, doesn't it just kind of like, I'm doing this because you're making me do it? This really kind of like sounds like you are a dynamic and creative and resourceful person. No, it sounds like, you know, you're doing it and you're going to do it to kind of like the lowest common denominator. And I think that there's an opportunity to, like, embrace this and to be, like I said, entrepreneurial about it. Once you get past compliance, you can find out that there are actually ways to improve performance and decarbonize. And that's not 100% of the problem. Or the solution. What it is it's probably 25% of the solution, then 25% is energy efficiency and you know, renewables, and then the other 50% is stuff that's still being invented today. So I look at it as, you know, my what I focus on is capital markets and pension funds, institutional equity, sovereign wealth, that sort of thing. They've made these commitments. Now they're looking for partners to kind of like really embrace it and find the opportunity in doing it right.
So compliance requirements, fine, but also maybe
It's
that leads you
growing.
to the,
Yeah.
it's growing, and we got to
Yeah.
watch out for that. But big picture, you're kind of saying people will do the minimum to meet the requirements.
And they're missing a huge opportunity to basically become better investment managers. That's kind of
So
like how I look, I look at it as, find a way to really get kind of involved in this and to think about doing it, making it a problem solving exercise and not something you're being forced to do.
Mhm.
So you like when the investment manager has a point of view and is driving that. The people with the
Mhm.
money, the equity, are saying this is core to us.
It makes it so seriously. It makes it easier all the way around when attached to the check is a string that says what is your emissions reduction plan. You need to provide to me, annual benchmark. You need to submit to GRESB. But I embrace it. This is the difference. I don't do it because somebody's making me do it. I do it because I'm excited about doing it. And I think that approach will lead to, basically, it'll lead to success and growth. If your approach to sustainability is, I have to do 4 building certifications a year and I need to just find the cheapest one, you're doing worthless building certifications. But if you really get involved and you go through the experience and embrace it, and you pull in your site team and you market this to the people at your community, but then you look at the results of this and not more about what did we accomplish, but what is there left to, like, what else can we do? I look at it as a gap analysis. And, we're doing a Fitwell certification right now, and I'm not really interested in how we comply. I'm interested in what is the best, what best practices have we not considered, and are those valuable to the real estate?
Brilliant. So we talked about the investment management side, the kind of community or property management side of things. We hinted at the fact there might actually be a human being that lives in some of these spaces and is involved in the story, the resident, if you will. Where are these properties? How do I become a resident of a Stoneweg building, first of all? And maybe just share some of the cool things you're doing with water,
So,
green space.
yeah.
Just tell us what's going on.
I think the thing that I'm most proud of right now is kind of the growing aspect of our ground up construction, because, acquiring existing buildings, we have a portfolio that covers about 13 states. So we're not nationwide. We look across the U.S., even though we tend to focus on the Sun Belt and Midwest. We've been all over the map in the last 7 years, and I find kind of like being able to think about it from kind of like, land acquisition and entitlement and design, and from the ground up, what do you want to build that'll last 100 years? I feel like that is kind of the biggest opportunity to really, because you sort of have a blank page and you're kind of allowed to have more of an imagination. There's a lot. What I said is I've got to treat everything else like an investment. So there are 10 things that I'm able to do with real estate acquisitions in general. Often when we do, water conservation, some limited photovoltaic, looking at opportunities to do power purchase agreements, do programmatic retrofits or replacements of mechanical equipment, insulation, and this kind of stuff. Like, there's a lot of stuff in this universe that just doesn't pencil today. It will one day. I mean, prices are coming down on a lot of these things, and it's just about kind of like finding the right opportunity. But with ground up construction, it's a bit of a different dynamic. You can just be a lot more creative. How buildings are placed, and basically how they're constructed can make a huge impact on, on their energy efficiency, their wall to window ratio and all this sort of stuff. You think about, climate resilience and embodied carbon. Nobody really often thinks about kind of like, all the energy that goes into building a building, and then, am I putting in too much energy? Am I putting in the right amount? And there's an interesting kind of thought experiment, especially on kind of the Gulf Coast here, and thinking about the foundations of buildings and using less concrete and allowing water to move in and out from underneath your building is actually, it's more resilient. It's less expensive. Like, all of these things can then all of a sudden be tracking in the same direction. So you're bringing down your costs, you're making the property more resilient and stand up to changes in the climate over time. Like, to me, this is like, I find a lot of, I find that this is where I think I really like to think about what the future of real estate should look like. And, it's not about just kind of like putting up as many, gray boxes as possible with, and as fast as possible. It's more about being thoughtful in what you're building and making it durable and making something that people enjoy.
The concept of a living building was always very interesting to me, just to like put that hat on if you're going to build something. And maybe those kind of ideas like you talked about, where water is part of this structure, the water, instead of how do I box this off with concrete and then go, everything here is mine. And, I don't know.
Yeah,
I like the concept of a living building.
I would rather, find something that kind of like, think about it in terms of San Francisco, how you build for earthquakes. You build a building that bends. You don't just kind of like make it wider and wider and wider. Right. So, you make it so it kind of like it works with the environment. And sometimes this can be a bit daunting to people because they just want a quick and easy solution. But, unfortunately, nothing good comes from fast and easy.
Well, yeah, the mold to the environment, definitely. I think that's a huge thing. Like, especially, I mean, we live in the US, it's a very big, large area. There's all different aspects. There's totally different terrains all throughout the US. There's a lot of room for, improvement in that way, research to be done, working with the people that know those things in the area, I think is huge too. So I think, like, as far as like, the residents, like, I think it's good to make it easier for them, right, to indulge in some of these ESG efforts, but also like empowering them and understanding like their environment where they are living and how it's different, from others and how they can help in that way. I think that's huge. I wanted to dive in and going back a little bit, so apologies, going back to the carbon footprint analysis that dropped, right? I know we touched on it a little bit and we talked about things revolve around, but can you give us like a more in-depth like understanding of what was in there, like what it shows?
Sure.
And also obviously like you guys have a reduction goal of 42% in emissions in the next 8 years, which is huge. It's a huge number to think of. So with that analysis, does that, strengthen your guys's, promise that you'll be able to hit that goal in the 8 years, or what did you get from that?
So the 2030 goal of, a huge amount of reduction, and that's just for our corporate operations. It's a 60+% goal for our existing portfolio, and thinking about it can give me an anxiety attack. But so here's kind of the practical route that I take, is that I need to improve 2, 3, 5% in certain aspects by next year. Where can I find a way to do a little bit better? And I think that approach of making kind of your long-term plan into a series of incremental improvements towards this goal can make it more tangible and feasible and comprehensible. And then also, I mentioned energy efficiency and the change in this over time. I would, for some reason, I sit at home and I research energy code policy and read about this, and because I really think it's interesting, and I think that the dynamics of this are interesting. But if you look at the rate of change, because I spent some time calculating this yesterday, and the rate of change in energy efficiency over time, it's interesting that it's speeding up, because to me that's counterintuitive. I would imagine it's getting harder.
Right.
As you get closer to zero, it should be harder to make things more energy efficient.
Yeah.
So it probably long term it's going to hit some walls, but actually in the last 30, 40 years, it's entered a breakneck speed of improvement. So, inertia is not going to do it all for you. But what I can say is, to give people some hope, is that it's going to do some of this work. It's going to help accomplish some of these things, but that's only if you take advantage of the opportunities. And that's why, kind of going back to the CapEx investment, being thoughtful about how you approach these sorts of things. If you own a lot of real estate, you should understand that the built environment is made up of all of these components, and you should have an inventory of this. You should understand it and you should manage it, not because of anything else other than the better you understand your inventory of real estate and the built environment, the better you're going to perform in terms of value creation and the outcome. And why is because the more that is unknown, the more risk there is, and the higher the cost is in the marketplace. So if you have basically a good understanding of your own portfolio, and then also how you acquire and how you create value, you're going to just make more money, bottom line. It's just, that's kind of like that's a function of how I look at sustainability and its intersection with commercial real estate investing. Kind of getting back to what, our carbon accounting, we spent a long time trying to understand our portfolio. Like, I'm talking about understanding it. I'm taking for granted that there was a point where I did not. I had good intentions, but I did not fully understand it. And a lot of that work, like I did over the last several years with the people that work for you, Ryan, and we've all kind of grown together in this understanding. And where that's led me is that, there is a disadvantage on not having these sorts of systems in place, in that you're going to end up, just by having a question mark around building performance, you're going to end up paying a discount, or I could probably get 2 or 3% more in value. And when you do that on the magnitude of billions, like we do, that makes an enormous difference. Enormous difference in a number of things, in a number of ways. But financially, and that's really kind of like what ultimately I have to do, is I have to make it good business as well. I want to do the right thing, because that's just fundamentally how I'm wired. My first instinct is to do what is correct, but it's my job to also make good investment decisions. And so I have to kind of marry those, and I have to kind of figure out the right path forward, and carbon accounting is a way to get started on it.
Yeah, well, we definitely applaud you. I think you're definitely a leader in a lot of these efforts, and I think a lot of investment managers could look up to you, and definitely the business plans that you brought out, and a lot of the measures that you're going through. So definitely want to shout you out.
Appreciate it.
Agreed. Chris, did you read that report?
It just came out yesterday, so not yet.
All right, me neither.
But I'm definitely looking forward to reading through it.
Guilty. It came out yesterday. I was like, oh, I better read this. I was like, I'll get to it this weekend or something.
I know this sounds odd, but I have our marketing people working on a T-shirt, and the little, just kind of like illustrate it graphically, and then also it'll be one of those T-shirts, like long sleeve, that you can wear while you're kayaking. So it's will provide you some UV protection, and I guess that's really that's meta, right?
Definitely.
But then QR code to it, and they can share it, and what I do, I want people to read it. And what I can say is that this is the first time we published it, and it'll get better. And I want to encourage everyone to, take a stab at it and to get started. Don't be afraid to kind of, look at this and just try to begin to put the pieces together and get started. Don't be afraid to be a beginner.
Well, yeah, thank you on behalf of humans and residents for that inspiration. I really appreciate the wisdom that you shared today. I heard that there's actually hope from inertia. We've always trying to feel, see what the hope is, and that inertia hope, that's a new one. I like that concept. Before we wrap, we do have a quick game we would like to play with you, Thomas. As we said, these are very important and heavy and meaningful topics, but we also want to maintain a little levity as we go. So I got a just quick little game here for you. It's a 1-question game. You ready?
Okay. Yep.
Okay. This game is called How Many Places Named This? Okay. How many places named this? This is inspired by understanding the meaning and use of names, not dead naming. Just names can be important or cannot be important. Okay. How many places are there in the US named St. Petersburg? Oh,
Well,
I got options. None.
Well, I live in
None?
St. Petersburg, so
Okay.
I know it's more than 0.
1, 2, 3, or 11.
I would go with 11. US is a big place.
It is a big place. It's not 11. I believe it's only 3. It's only 3. It's only 3. St. Petersburg, Florida is the only one that's actually a city.
Okay.
There is a St. Petersburg, Pennsylvania that is a borough. And there's a St. Petersburg, Colorado that is lesser known and is not officially recognized as a city. So that's what my research says, that only St. Petersburg. And why do I say St. Petersburg? Because I spend a lot of time. Stoneweg's there. You live there. I want to get. I'm just trying to find a way to get to that dinner table with you and your husband and have some of those conversations.
Geology, you'll love it.
That's right up my alley. I'd love to learn that stuff. So, thank you very much again for your time today. Really appreciate it. Chris, thanks for co-hosting. Appreciate that. Healy's going to appreciate it. And with that, this has been another episode of the ESG Experience podcast. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed your time with us, make sure to subscribe to your favorite podcast directory. There is a new episode every month. Thanks to our loyal subscribers for your continuing support. If you want to continue the conversation between episodes, follow us on your favorite social media channel at #ESG Experience. Thanks again, Thomas. Have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.